I lost £510,000 in 19 months. Not to a bad investment, not to a failed business, to a woman I thought loved me, a woman who was supposed to be caring for me in my final years. Instead, she was systematically positioning herself to profit from my death. I'm 70 years old. I spent 43 years working in insurance. I understood policies, beneficiaries, actuarial tables, risk assessment. I'd seen every scam, every scheme, every way people try to game the system. And yet when it happened to me, I didn't see it coming. Or maybe I did, and I just didn't want to believe it. That's the part that keeps me awake at night. Not the money, the willingness to be deceived. My name is Raymond. I'm telling you that because I don't want to hide behind anonymity. I did this. I let this happen. And if putting my name to this story stops even one other man from making the same mistake, then maybe it means something. I met Preu 3 years after my wife died, Margaret. We'd been married for 41 years. She had early onset Alzheimer's. I watched her disappear over 7 years. By the end, she didn't know who I was. The woman I'd spent my entire adult life with would look at me like I was a stranger who'd wandered into her room. When she finally went, I felt relief. I'm not proud of that, but it's true. I was 65 and exhausted, and I felt guilty for being glad it was over. I didn't know what to do with myself after she died. Our kids were grown with their own families in London and Manchester. They visited, but not often enough to fill the days. I'd retired at 60, thinking Margaret and I would travel. We'd always talked about Southeast Asia. She'd wanted to see the temples in Cambodia, the beaches in Thailand. We never made it. By the time I retired, she was already forgetting things. By the time I'd have been free to go, I was a widower. A colleague from work, Dennis, kept telling me I should travel anyway. Do it for Margaret, he said. See the places she wanted to see. It felt morbid at first, visiting places alone that I'd planned to visit with someone else. But 18 months after the funeral, sitting in my house in Leicester on a February evening with the rain coming down and nothing but memories, I thought, why not? I booked a flight to Bangkok, 2 weeks, just to see what it was like. I arrived on a Tuesday morning in October 2022. The heat hit me the moment I stepped off the plane. Not unpleasant, different. After 45 years of British weather, the warmth felt like something waking up inside me. I took a taxi to my hotel in Sukhumvit and spent the first 2 days just walking around, trying to adjust to the time difference and the chaos and the sheer foreignness of everything. On the third day, I took a day trip to Pattaya. I'd read it was a beach resort. The travel agent back home had raised her eyebrows when I mentioned it, but I didn't understand why until I arrived. Walking street, bars everywhere, women everywhere. I felt uncomfortable and out of place. I'm not that kind of man. I never have been. Margaret was my first and only. The idea of paying for company felt cheap and sad. I was sitting in a coffee shop on Beach Road, drinking terrible instant coffee and watching the sea, when a woman sat down at the next table. She was Thai, probably early 30s, wearing what I now know were care home scrubs. She had a kind face. She smiled at me and said hello in English. Her name was Preu. She worked at a private care facility in Rayong, about an hour away. She was in Pattaya visiting her sister. We talked for perhaps 20 minutes. She asked about England. I asked about her work. She told me about the elderly patients she cared for, how she loved making them comfortable, how she'd wanted to be a nurse but her family couldn't afford the training. There was something gentle about her, something that reminded me of Margaret before the illness, a kindness in her eyes. Before I left, she wrote her phone number on a napkin. If you want someone to show you real Thailand, not tourist Thailand, she said, message me. I didn't message her. I went back to Bangkok and spent the rest of my 2 weeks visiting temples and museums. I flew home, thinking I'd done what I came to do. I'd seen Thailand. I'd honored Margaret's wish in a way. I could move on now. But I couldn't stop thinking about Praew. Not in a romantic way, not at first. Just the memory of someone being genuinely kind to me without wanting anything. I hadn't felt that since Margaret got sick. Back home, people were polite but distant. They knew I was a widower and it made them uncomfortable. They didn't know what to say to me. In Thailand, in that coffee shop, a stranger had just talked to me like I was a person, like I mattered. 3 weeks after I got home, I sent her a message on WhatsApp, just thanking her for her kindness and hoping she was well. She replied within an hour. We started messaging every few days. Nothing inappropriate, just friendly conversation. She'd tell me about her day at the care home. I'd tell her about the weather in Leicester. It was nice, comfortable. I looked forward to her messages. After 2 months of this, she asked if I was planning to come back to Thailand. I hadn't been, but when she asked, I realized I wanted to. I booked another trip, 3 weeks this time, January 2023. She met me at the airport in Bangkok. I'd offered to come to Rayong, but she said she'd take a few days off work and show me around the capital. We spent 4 days together before anything physical happened. I want to be clear about that. She wasn't throwing herself at me, she was just present, attentive, interested in what I had to say. When I talked about Margaret, she listened, really listened. She asked questions. She didn't seem uncomfortable with my grief the way everyone back home did. On the 4th night, we were having dinner at a small restaurant near my hotel. Nothing fancy. She'd ordered for us because my Thai was non-existent. We'd shared a bottle of wine. She reached across the table and took my hand. "You're a good man, Raymond," she said. "You deserve to be happy again." I'm not proud of how quickly I fell. Maybe it wasn't even falling. Maybe it was just desperation dressed up as love. I was 67. My wife was dead. My kids treated me like an obligation. And here was this beautiful young woman telling me I deserved happiness. What man wouldn't want to believe that? We slept together that night. I won't go into detail. It's not relevant. What's relevant is that the next morning, she didn't leave. She stayed. We had breakfast. She asked if I wanted to see Rayong, meet her family. I said yes. Her mother lived in a small house on the outskirts of Rayong. Nothing like the poverty I'd seen in documentaries, but clearly working class. The house was concrete, painted blue, with a tin roof. Her mother spoke no English but smiled constantly and kept bringing me food. Preu's brother was there too. Younger, maybe 26, working in construction. Through Preu's translation, he thanked me for making his sister happy. It felt real, like I was being welcomed into something. That evening, Preu told me her mother was sick, diabetes and heart problems. The medication was expensive. The family was managing, she said, but it was hard. She wasn't asking for money. She made that very clear, just explaining why her brother looked tired, why her mother looked older than her years. I gave Praew 500 pounds before I left, about 23,000 baht. I told her it was for her mother's medication. She cried and said it was too much. I insisted. It felt good. I'd spent 4 decades working in insurance, watching people protect themselves against disaster. Here I was, actually helping someone, directly, immediately. I went home after that trip, but I knew I was going back, not for a holiday, to stay. I started the visa process in March 2023, retirement visa. You need to show 800,000 baht in a Thai bank account, or proof of a monthly income of 65,000 baht. I had both. My pension from the insurance company was solid, and I'd sold our house in Leicester after Margaret died. I had savings, more than enough to live comfortably in Thailand. Praew and I talked on video calls every single day. She'd show me properties online, small houses, condos in Rayong, nothing extravagant. She kept saying we should start small, make sure I really liked Thailand before making big decisions. Looking back, that was clever, making me think she wasn't after my money, making me feel like she was the cautious one. I moved to Thailand in July 2023. I rented a condo in Rayong first, just to test things. 2-bedroom place, furnished, 25,000 baht per month, about 550 pounds. Praew moved in almost immediately. She said it made sense. She was at my place every night anyway, and the commute to the care home was shorter from my condo than from her mother's house. It felt like playing house, like being newlyweds, which is ridiculous for a 68-year-old man to say, but that's what it felt like. She'd cook for me. Thai food I'd never heard of. She'd teach me Thai words. She'd laugh at my pronunciation. When I'd wake up at 3 in the morning, jet-lagged and disoriented, she'd be there. "You're safe," she'd say. "I'm here." 3 months after I moved in, she asked if we could talk seriously. I thought she was going to ask about marriage. She didn't. She asked about life insurance. I should have known then. I should have heard the alarm bells, but she framed it perfectly. She said she'd been thinking about her mother, about her brother, about what would happen if something happened to her. Who would take care of them? And then she said she'd been thinking about me too. I was 68, healthy, but 68. If something happened to me, what would happen to her? She'd left her job to care for me full time. I hadn't asked her to. She'd just quietly stopped working about a month after I arrived. Said she wanted to focus on making me comfortable. It made sense. Of course it made sense. I had a life insurance policy from my working days. £150,000. The beneficiary was still my kids. 50% to my son James, 50% to my daughter Claire. But they were fine. James was a solicitor in London. Claire's husband ran a successful accounting firm. They didn't need the money. Not really. Preu wasn't asking me to change it. That's what made it so insidious. She was just raising the topic, just making me think about it, just wondering aloud what would happen to her if I died. I thought about it for a week. I told myself I was being rational, weighing options, thinking it through. But really, I'd already decided. I went to my insurance company's local office in Pattaya, changed the beneficiary to Preu, 50% to her, 25% to James, 25% to Claire. A compromise, I told myself, fair to everyone. I didn't tell my kids. I meant to. I kept meaning to. But I knew what they'd say. I knew James would ask if I was thinking clearly. I knew Claire would ask how long I'd known this woman. 7 months, I'd have to say. You've known her 7 months and you're giving her half your life insurance? No. Better to just do it and tell them later. After Praew and I were married, after it was all settled, the wedding happened in December 2023. Small ceremony at a temple in Raymond. Preu's family was there. About 30 people I didn't know. Her mother cried. Her brother gave a speech in Thai that Preu translated. He said I was a blessing to their family, that they were grateful to me for making his sister happy. My kids didn't come. I'd invited them, paid for their flights. James said he couldn't get time off work. Claire said the grandkids had school. I knew they disapproved. I'd told them about Preu 6 months earlier. The call had gone exactly how I'd feared. James had been blunt. "Dad, she's 41 years younger than you." Claire had been gentler but equally skeptical. "Just be careful, Dad. Make sure she loves you for you." I'd gotten defensive, told them they didn't understand, told them I was happy for the first time since their mother died. James had said fine, but don't say we didn't warn you. We'd barely spoken since. After the wedding, Praew suggested we buy a house instead of renting. It made sense financially, she said. The rent was just dead money. If we bought, we'd have an asset. Something that would appreciate in value. She showed me property listings. Small houses, 2 bedrooms, gardens. Nothing extravagant. Prices around 2 to 3 million baht, about 45 to 70,000 pounds. I knew the law. Foreigners can't own land in Thailand. The house would have to be in her name. But we were married now. What's mine is yours. What's yours is mine. That's how marriage works. I'd been married for 41 years. I understood partnership. We found a house in Ban Chang, about 20 minutes from Rayong. 2 bedrooms, small garden, quiet street. 3 million baht. I transferred the money from my UK account, 70,000 pounds. We signed the papers in January 2024. Everything in Preu's name. The lawyer explained it to me. I signed forms I couldn't read. Preu translated what she said were the important bits. 2 weeks after we moved in, Preu asked about power of attorney. Medical power of attorney, specifically. She'd been reading online about expats in Thailand who'd had strokes or heart attacks, and the hospitals wouldn't let their Thai wives make decisions because they weren't legal family. "It happens all the time," she said. "Farang men collapse, the hospital needs consent for surgery, the wife can't give it because the paperwork isn't right." She showed me stories, forum posts from expat websites. Men who died because their wives couldn't authorize emergency treatment. I was 68. I had high blood pressure. I'd had a scare 2 years earlier, before Margaret died. A minor heart incident. Nothing serious, but it had frightened me. The idea of collapsing in Thailand, unable to communicate, with doctors asking for consent from children who were 8,000 miles away and hadn't spoken to me in months, it was terrifying. I signed the power of attorney documents in February 2024. Medical decisions only. That's what Praew said. That's what I thought I was signing. The lawyer was Thai. He spoke minimal English. Praew translated. I trusted her. Looking back now, I can see the pattern. Each step was small. Each decision was rational. Life insurance? Of course, protect your wife. Buy a house? Of course, stop wasting money on rent. Power of attorney? Of course, in case of emergency. Each step by itself was reasonable, but together they were a trap being built around me. In March 2024, Preu's brother had an accident, construction site injury, broke his leg in 2 places, needed surgery. The family didn't have insurance. They needed 200,000 baht, about 4,000 pounds. Praew was crying when she told me. She wasn't asking for money. She never asked directly. She just told me the problem and then waited. Let me be the hero. Let me be the solution. I gave her the money, told her it was a loan. The family would pay it back when they could. She said thank you 100 times. You're so good to us, Raymond. I don't know what we'd do without you. The leg healed. The family never paid back the loan. When I mentioned it, gently, 3 months later, Preu looked hurt. Your family now, Raymond. Family doesn't keep score. That's not how we do things in Thailand. I felt ashamed for asking. In May, her mother needed a new medication. The old one wasn't working anymore. This new one was imported. Expensive. 50,000 baht per month. About 1,000 pounds. I paid for 3 months up front. Preu said she'd find a way to afford it after that. She never did. I paid for it every month after that. I didn't mind, not really. What else was I going to spend the money on? In July, Preu's niece needed school fees. Her sister couldn't afford the private school, but it was so much better than the government school. The girl was smart. She deserved a chance. 30,000 baht per term. I paid for the year. 90,000 baht. About 2,000 pounds. In September, the house needed repairs. Roof was leaking. Plumbing issues. Foundation cracks. 200,000 baht. About 4,000 pounds. I paid it. I was starting to feel the drain by then. Not financially critical. I still had most of my savings. But I could see the trajectory. 5,000 here, 10,000 there. It was adding up. I tried to talk to Preu about it in October. Just gently. Just suggesting maybe we should budget more carefully. She'd stopped working completely by then. Said she was taking care of me full-time, managing the house. But the house was small. There wasn't much to manage. I could see she was spending a lot of time on her phone. Shopping apps, mostly. New clothes kept appearing. A new phone. Gold jewelry. When I brought it up, she got angry. You think I'm using you for money? Is that what you think? After everything I've done for you? I take care of you every day, Raymond. I left my job for you. I gave up my independence for you. And now you're keeping track of every baht like I'm some kind of prostitute? I apologized immediately. I'd never meant to suggest that. I was just worried about the future, that's all. Making sure we were being careful. She cried. Said she felt so disrespected. Said in Thai culture, men take care of their wives, men provide. She made me feel like I was failing at being a husband. I didn't bring it up again. In November 2024, I had my annual physical. My doctor back in the UK had always said I was healthy for my age. High blood pressure under control, cholesterol fine, weight stable. I went to a private hospital in Pattaya, international hospital, English-speaking doctors. They ran the usual tests, blood work, ECG, chest x-ray. Everything came back fine. The doctor said I was in good shape for 70. Keep taking the blood pressure medication, keep exercising, watch the sodium. Standard advice. I felt relieved. Vindicated. even. I was healthy. I could have years left, years with Praew, years in Thailand. I told Praew the good news that evening. She smiled and said she was glad, but there was something in her expression, just for a moment, a flicker of something that wasn't happiness. Disappointment, maybe. I told myself I was imagining it. Why would she be disappointed that I was healthy? 2 weeks after the physical, I got a call from my insurance company in the UK. Not the main line, someone from the beneficiary services department. They were calling to confirm recent changes to my policy. I said I'd changed the beneficiary earlier that year. Yes. The woman on the phone paused. She said she was actually calling about a second change, filed in October. I told her there must be a mistake. I hadn't made any changes in October. She read me the details. Beneficiary change form, signed October 15, 2024. All benefits now directed to Preu's mother, Somjit Nakorn, 70%. Preu's brother, Wichit, 20%. Preu's sister, Suda, 10%. My children removed entirely. I couldn't breathe properly. I told the woman there had been a mistake. I hadn't signed anything. She said she was looking at the form right now. It had my signature. It had been filed through the company's international claims portal. The submission had come from an IP address in Thailand. I asked her to email me a copy of the form. She did. I opened it on my phone while still on the call. The signature looked like mine. Similar enough, but I hadn't signed this. I would have remembered signing this. I would never cut my kids out completely, no matter how angry I was at them. They were still my children. I hung up and sat in the living room for maybe 20 minutes, just staring at the email on my phone, trying to understand what I was seeing. Praew was in the bedroom. I could hear her on a video call, speaking Thai, laughing. When she came out, I showed her the email, asked her if she knew anything about this. She looked at it, looked at me, said no, of course not. Why would she? I asked her directly if she'd submitted a beneficiary change form in October. She said no. She didn't even know how to do that. She'd never accessed my insurance portal. I wanted to believe her. I tried to believe her. But I remembered the power of attorney documents. I remembered signing papers I couldn't read. What if those papers hadn't been just for medical decisions? What if I'd signed something broader, something that gave her access to my accounts, my policies, my documents? I called the lawyer who'd processed the power of attorney, got his assistant because he was in court, asked her to send me copies of everything I'd signed. She said she'd email them the next day. That night, Praew was distant, cold. She went to bed early, didn't kiss me goodnight. I sat up until 3 a.m, looking at the insurance form, looking at the signature, trying to remember if I'd signed it during some moment I'd forgotten. Maybe I'd been tired. Maybe I'd had a few drinks. Maybe I'd signed something without reading it properly. But I knew I hadn't. I knew exactly what had happened. I just didn't want to know. The lawyer's assistant emailed me the documents the next morning. I used Google Translate to work through them. The Thai text was dense, legal language I couldn't fully parse. But there were sections about healthcare decisions, hospital authorization, medical treatment consent. And then, buried in paragraph 7 of the 3rd page, a clause about financial decisions in the event of incapacitation or death. Authorization to manage accounts, policies, and assets on behalf of the principal for the purposes of ensuring continuity of care and settling final affairs. I'd given her power of attorney over everything, not just medical decisions, everything. I confronted her that afternoon, showed her the translated documents, asked her why she'd told me it was only for medical decisions. She got defensive immediately, said the lawyer had explained it all to me, said I'd signed it knowing what it was, said if I didn't trust her, what was the point of being married? I asked her directly if she'd changed my insurance beneficiary without telling me. She said yes, she had, because she was protecting her family. Because I'd promised to take care of them and she knew when I died I'd want them taken care of. She was just making sure it happened, making sure my kids, who didn't even talk to me, who hadn't visited in over a year, couldn't contest it. I told her I wanted the beneficiary changed back. She said no, we were married. Her family was my family now. This was how it worked. I told her I'd call the insurance company myself and reverse it. She said if I did that, she'd leave, pack her things and go back to her mother's house, and I'd be alone in Thailand with no one. Was that what I wanted? To die alone? I felt something break inside me then. Not my heart. Something harder than that. Some foundational belief I'd held about the world, about people, about myself. I'd spent 43 years in insurance. I'd literally made a career out of understanding risk, understanding how people protect themselves and their families. And I'd walked straight into the most obvious scam imaginable. I didn't change the beneficiary back. Not that day. I told myself I needed time to think, time to figure out what to do. But really, I was afraid of being alone. I was 70. I was in a foreign country. My kids weren't speaking to me. My friends back home were distant memories. Praew was all I had. Even if she was using me, at least she was there. For 2 weeks, we lived in this horrible limbo, barely speaking. She slept in the second bedroom. I slept badly, waking up at 2, 3, 4 in the morning, running through scenarios. Could I force her out of the house? No, it was in her name. Could I cut off her access to my money? Partially, but we had a joint account now. Could I leave Thailand? Yes. But what then? Go back to Leicester? To what? An empty house and adult children who'd say I told you so? In December 2024, I discovered the credit card. I was going through bank statements, trying to understand exactly how much money had flowed out in the 19 months since I'd arrived. I saw a charge I didn't recognize. 300,000 baht to Thai Credit Corp. I asked Preu about it. She said it was nothing, a mistake. When I pushed, she admitted she'd opened a credit card in my name. Using the power of attorney, she'd needed it for her mother's medical expenses. The medication had gotten more expensive. There'd been hospital visits. She hadn't wanted to bother me with it. The credit limit was 500,000 baht, about 11,000 pounds. She'd maxed it out. The minimum payments were 70,000 baht per month, about 1,500 pounds. The interest rate was 28%. I went to the bank the next day, tried to close the card. They said I couldn't, not without Preu's signature. She was listed as the account manager. I'd apparently authorized that when I'd signed the power of attorney documents. That night, I told Preu I wanted a divorce. She laughed, actually laughed. You want a divorce? Fine, divorce me. The house is mine, the car is mine, the bank account is half mine. You'll leave with nothing, Raymond. Nothing. And good luck getting another visa. Good luck finding another woman who'll put up with you at 70. Go ahead, divorce me. See how that works out for you. I didn't sleep that night. I sat in the living room, watching the sun come up, trying to calculate exactly how much I'd lost. The house. 70,000 pounds. The car she'd bought 6 months earlier, which I'd paid for. 15,000 pounds. The loans to her family. Roughly 40,000 pounds. The credit card. 11,000 pounds. The monthly expenses for her mother's medication, her niece's school, repairs, gold jewelry, phones, shopping, at least another 50,000 pounds over 19 months. 186,000 pounds. Gone. And I still had the insurance policy hanging over me. 150,000 pounds that would go to her family when I died. Money that should have gone to my children. For the first time, I understood why she'd been disappointed when my physical came back healthy. How long had she been expecting me to die? Had she been hoping for it? The thought made me nauseous. I called James in January 2025, first time we'd spoken in 7 months. I told him everything, every detail, every pound, every document I'd signed without understanding. He was quiet for a long time after I finished. Then he said, "Dad, you need to get out of there." He was right. I knew he was right. But getting out wasn't simple. I contacted a lawyer in Bangkok, English speaking, specializes in expat issues. He told me what I already knew. The house was hers. The car was hers. The joint account would be split 50-50, but only what was left. The credit card debt was mine. The insurance policy could be changed, but only through the UK company, and it would take months to process. In the meantime, if I died, the money went to her family. The lawyer asked if I felt safe, physically safe. I said yes. I did, actually. I didn't think Preu would hurt me. She didn't need to. She just needed to wait. I was 70. Eventually, nature would do the work for her. I changed the insurance beneficiary in February, called the company from the lawyer's office, explained the situation. Fraud, I said. Forgery. The company said they'd investigate. Could take up to 90 days. In the meantime, the fraudulent beneficiary designation remained in place. I asked what happened if I died during the investigation. The woman on the phone said she wasn't sure. She'd have to check with legal. I moved out in March 2025, packed 2 suitcases, left everything else. Preu wasn't home when I left. I don't know where she was. I didn't leave a note. I'd paid the rent on a small condo in Bangkok, near the British Embassy. 1 bedroom, furnished. 30,000 baht per month. It was all I could afford now. I filed for divorce in April. Praew contested it. Said I owed her alimony. Said I'd promised to support her family. Said she'd given up her career for me. The lawyer said it would take at least a year to finalize, possibly longer if she kept fighting it. In the meantime, I had to keep paying the credit card. Had to keep paying her half of any remaining joint assets. I'm still here, still in Bangkok, still paying. The investigation into the insurance fraud concluded in June. The company determined that while the beneficiary change was suspicious, I had legally granted power of attorney and the form submission had been processed according to their protocols. They reinstated my children as beneficiaries, but it took 5 months. 5 months where if I died, £150,000 would have gone to people who'd systematically drained me dry. I have £324,000 left. That's from the original £510,000 I had when I moved here. In 22 months, I lost £186,000. Plus the insurance policy hanging over me like a sword. Plus the credit card debt I'm still paying off. Plus the legal fees for the divorce that's still grinding through the courts. My children are speaking to me again. James calls once a week. Claire emails. They don't say, "I told you so," but I can hear it in their voices. The sympathy mixed with frustration. Why didn't you listen? Why didn't you protect yourself? Why did you trust her? I don't have good answers. I was lonely. I was grieving. I wanted to believe someone could love me. Those aren't good answers, but they're the only ones I have. I think about Praew sometimes. Wonder if she ever felt anything real for me. Wonder if there was a moment, even one moment, where it wasn't just a transaction. I don't think there was. I think from the first conversation in that coffee shop in Pattaya, she knew exactly what she was doing. I was old, recently widowed, vulnerable, and I worked in insurance. She knew I'd have policies. She knew I'd have money. She knew how to position herself. The care home job, the sick mother, the troubled brother. Maybe it was all real. Maybe it was all true. But it was also perfect bait. I was an insurance broker. I'd spent my life thinking about beneficiaries and death benefits and protecting families. Of course I'd respond to a woman who cared for the elderly. Of course I'd want to help her family. She knew exactly what to be. The worst part isn't the money. I know that sounds absurd. £186,000 isn't nothing. It's my children's inheritance. It's my security for the next decade. It's gone, and I'll never get it back. But the worst part is the feeling of being seen as nothing but a resource, a countdown timer, with a bank account attached. She wasn't waiting for me to die because she hated me. She was waiting because it was the logical endpoint of her investment. I'm 70 years old. I'm living in a 1-bedroom condo in Bangkok. I'm healthy, according to the doctors, but I don't feel healthy. I feel tired, used up. I have enough money to live simply for another 15 years if I'm careful, if I stretch it, if nothing unexpected happens. I'm not going back to the UK. People ask me why. My kids ask me. My friends back home ask me. Because going back feels like admitting defeat. Like admitting that the entire Thailand chapter was a mistake from start to finish. At least here, I can pretend I'm still choosing this life, still choosing to be here, even if the choice is really just stubbornness and shame. If you're reading this and you're thinking about what I did retiring to Thailand, marrying a younger Thai woman, putting assets in her name, signing documents you don't fully understand. Please don't. I don't care how different your situation is. I don't care how much you trust her. I don't care if she's never asked you for money. None of that matters. The rules aren't different in Thailand. They're exactly the same. Money is money. Power is power. Vulnerability is vulnerability. I thought being older meant being wiser. It doesn't. It just means you have more to lose. I had a good life before Thailand. A real marriage. Children who loved me. Financial security. I threw it away because I couldn't bear to be alone. Because I wanted someone to look at me and see value instead of burden. And someone did look at me and see value. Just not the kind of value I thought. I don't know what happens next. The divorce will eventually finalize. I'll eventually have to decide whether to stay in Thailand or go home. I'll eventually have to rebuild some kind of relationship with my children beyond weekly pity calls. But right now, I'm just trying to get through each day without calculating how much that day cost me. Without wondering if Preu is living in the house I bought, sleeping in the bed I paid for with someone new. Without thinking about the insurance policy that turned me from a husband into an investment. I'm 70 years old and I'm starting over. Some people would say that's brave. I think it's just what happens when you don't have any other options.